Hello, my name is Anthony Garcia of Allied Signs, and what I'm going to show you today is the way that I like to install the power in feed to the JS LED Flex lighting. Now normally what's supplied, this is just a cut-off one, is a connector like this where you put in a pin and this goes on, and whenever it goes on it has a unsightly long piece, and then if you want to hide this, you're drilling your hole for your wire to go in quite a distance away from where the lighting actually ends. And so in order to fix that little problem, I'm going to show you today how that we're going to use a standard end cap. That's the ZFN 108 end cap, and then a ZFN 102 connector pin. Okay, so now we're going to install our connector, and the connector pin into the end of the flex tube lighting, it really doesn't matter which end we do it on, because you may want it on the left hand side of your eventual install or on the right hand side. The important thing is to remember the polarity. On either one, the top connector is the positive. That's the one we want our 24 volts to go to. So let's start off with our ZFN 102 connector pin, and as we look at this pin, you notice that one end is blunt and one end sharp, the sharp end made to go into the flex tube lighting. And as we push it in, we give it a good heavy push with the pliers, seat it real nice. Then what our goal is to bend them both facing out and kind of roll them around on the pliers. Be careful, because you can bust it if you bend it too sharp. Just about like that. Okay, now the next thing is get it kind of clamped down here where we can work with it. And then we're going to get our wire, and we're going to strip both ends off here for us, and about a ½ inch of wire there. Now of course it's important to remember to do both ends, because we're going to test it before we solder. And that way, if the connection isn't good, then we can make the changes before we solder and silicone it all up. And so then our first thing we want to do is kind of give each wire a little bit of a hook here. And red wire on the top, black wire on the bottom. Just like that. Kind of squeeze it together with your pliers. Just like so. So then once we have this hooked on there real nice, what I like to do is have something that holds the other end so one person can solder it. And of course I have this little contraption here, and you may come up with a better method, and get them where they're both pulled real nice and taut, and then we're ready to solder. And just before we solder, what we need to do is use the other end to make a test. Now what I have here is just a little 15 volt power supply that I got off of a piece of computer equipment, and I have it so that it puts out 15 volts here. 12 volts would probably be enough to test it, and I know that the inside of this is the positive and the outside is the negative. So all I'm doing in order to test it is pushing in my red positive, because you want to make sure you're doing this with the correct polarity, And then you notice as soon as I push that against there, I've got it tested. So once I've tested it, everything looks good. Now I'm going to do my solder. So let's see, let's just give it a little bit of heat here. Try not to let your heat stay on there too long so that it hurts anything. I have about a 40-watt iron going here, and in about 2 seconds I can solder them both. There we go, it's soldered. Plenty good. Kind of check everything, make sure it all looks good and sound. Make sure that everything looks like it won't come off later. Then our next step is to get our end cap and to drill a hole on the bottom side so that our wire can fit through. We're going to drill it out with a 5/16. And the goal is to get the hole as close as you can to the bottom edge, to the back side on the bottom edge of your clear connector. And basically we're going to feed it through, and you of course feed it from this end, not from that end. Give it a little bit of a tight fit is what I like to do. Once you kind of get it started, then it runs good. Okay. Now that we're up to about this point, our next goal is basically to kind of bend your wiring so that it's going to lay nice and flush and exit out the bottom without touching each other. So you notice I'm gonna kind of give it a little bit of a bend around and then exiting out. I make sure nothing's touching itself. Then I get a little bit of silicone and silicone in between those, and nice and healthy all around that. Then I get my cap at this point, silicone right in there, and push it on. Just like that. And I want it so that silicone squeezes out all over. Make sure it's all exiting out the bottom side really clean, because we want that cavity in there completely engulfed in silicone. Then what I like to do is flip it over, kind of make a little bit more stick out here in my clamp method. And now we're ready to put on the shrink wrap. And what I like to do with that, I cut it in half. You may use a full length, but I grab a little awl here and puncture it from the inside out. About right there would seem to be about right. Give it a real good working. Okay, so you want to work it from the inside out, but you want the long end. You want to come in from the long end, where your hole's at. So inside to out, where the long side comes in this way. And then we're going to basically set it into position. And then it's just a matter of grabbing our heat gun and shrinking it down. A little bit on the ends, make sure it's nice and tight. And I think we about have it. And notice how it shrinks real nice around the wire too. Okay. So, our last thing we're going to do, let me flip it over here. As you can see, it makes a real nice clean install where all the wiring is encased in silicone, nice and weatherable, and the install of the final product will just require drilling a 5/16 hole, or for some cabling a 1/4 inch hole, and making this wiring protrude down through that. And basically you have a real nice clean install whenever it's put on the face of a product.